General Harrison Hart's consciousness slowly resurfaced from the depths of cryo sleep. The darkness that had enveloped his mind for what felt like an eternity began to dissipate, replaced by a growing awareness of his surroundings. His body felt heavy, the remnants of the preservation gel clinging to his skin, cold and sticky. He tried to move his limbs, but they responded sluggishly, as if waking from a long, deep slumber. The first sound that pierced the fog in his mind was the blaring of klaxons. Flashing red lights assaulted his eyes, and he instinctively knew something was terribly wrong. Cryosleep was supposed to end peacefully, with a calm debriefing by his crew. But this was chaos. Hart's training kicked in, and despite the disorientation, he forced himself to sit up in the cryopod. "General Hart, can you hear me?" A voice crackled over the intercom. It was urgent and tinged with desperation. Hart groaned as he tried to focus on the source of the voice. "Yes, I can hear you," he managed, his voice rough from disuse. "What's the situation?" The voice belonged to Lieutenant Commander Soren, a young officer who Hart vaguely remembered from before the cryosleep. "Sir, we need you on the bridge immediately. The Unity fleet is closing in on us. We're on the brink of being overrun." Hart's heart raced as he processed the information. He swung his legs over the edge of the cryopod and tried to stand, his muscles protesting the sudden movement. He stumbled but caught himself on the edge of the pod, determined to reach the bridge and assess the situation firsthand. "Help me get to the bridge," he ordered. And within moments, a couple of crew members appeared, ready to assist him. With their support, Hart made his way through the dimly lit corridors of the ship, the constant blaring of alarms, a grim reminder of the urgency of the situation. As they approached the bridge, the scale of the crisis became apparent. The crew was in a state of barely controlled panic, their faces etched with fear and exhaustion. Hart pushed through the chaos, his presence bringing a semblance of order to the frantic activity. "General on the bridge," someone announced, and the room fell silent for a brief moment, all eyes turning to Hart. He surveyed the scene, taking in the holographic map, displaying the positions of the human and Unity fleets. The Unity forces had encircled the human stronghold, their ships closing in with relentless precision. Hart's mind raced, years of experience and strategic thinking coming to the forefront. "Get me a full status report," he commanded, his voice cutting through the tension. "I need to know exactly what we're dealing with." Lieutenant Commander Soren stood beside General Hart, his youthful face marred by the stress of the ongoing battle. Despite his relative inexperience, he had shown remarkable resilience in the face of adversity. Soren handed Hart a datapad, his hands steady despite the chaos around them. "Sir, this is the latest intel we have on the Unity fleet's movements and our current status," Soren said, his voice tight with controlled urgency. "We've sustained significant losses, but we're holding the line for now." Hart quickly scanned the datapad, absorbing the critical information. The human fleet was severely outnumbered, and the Unity strategy was clear, a full-scale assault designed to crush the remaining human resistance. Hart's mind flashed back to his training and countless simulations. This was what he had been prepared for. "Lieutenant Commander," Hart began, his tone calm yet authoritative, "I need a detailed breakdown of our available resources and tactical options. We can't afford to make any mistakes." Soren nodded, already anticipating the general's needs. "Yes, sir. We've got a few aces up our sleeves, but we'll need to be precise. The Unity is coordinating their attacks with ruthless efficiency." Hart appreciated Soren's straightforwardness. "Understood. I want all available ships ready for immediate action. Prepare the Artemis and the Achilles for a potential counterstrike. We need to create an opportunity, even if it means taking risks." Soren saluted and moved to relay the orders. Hart turned his attention back to the holographic display, his mind racing through various strategies. The Unity's strength lay in their numbers and coordination, but Hart knew that human ingenuity and adaptability could tip the scales if leveraged correctly. As he watched the shifting patterns of the enemy fleet, Hart's thoughts drifted to the men and women under his command. Each face represented a story, a life, a reason to fight. He had to find a way to protect them, to give humanity a fighting chance. "General Hart," a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Major Elena Rain, his chief tactical officer. We've detected a weak point in the Unity's formation. If we can exploit it, we might be able to disrupt their coordination long enough to launch a counterattack. Hart's eyes narrowed as he focused on the display. "Show me," he ordered. Rain brought up a detailed schematic, highlighting the vulnerable section. "Here, sir. It's a narrow passage between two moons. If we can lure a portion of their fleet into this choke point, we can hit them hard and fast." Hart's strategic mind immediately saw the potential. It was a risky maneuver, but the payoff could be significant. "Good work, Major. Prepare the fleet for a feigned retreat. We'll draw them in and then spring the trap." As Rain moved to execute the plan, Hart felt a renewed sense of purpose. The war might have been long and brutal, but with each challenge, he felt more determined. Humanity had come too far to be defeated now. He glanced at the faces of his officers, seeing the same determination mirrored in their eyes. They were ready to follow him into the fray, to fight for their survival and the future of their species. "Let's show them what we're made of," Hart said, his voice filled with steely resolve. "Prepare for battle." General Harrison Hart stood on the bridge, the hum of machinery and the beeping of various systems creating a backdrop to the tension-filled atmosphere. The holographic map floated in the center of the room, displaying the current positions of both the human and Unity fleets. The situation was grim. The Unity fleet, a vast and diverse armada composed of ships from multiple alien species, had formed a nearly impenetrable blockade around the human forces. Each species brought its own technology and tactics to the table, creating a multifaceted threat that was difficult to counter. The holographic icons showed swarms of enemy vessels closing in from all directions, their numbers overwhelmingly superior. Hart's eyes scanned the map, taking in the positions of his own ships. The human fleet was huddled together, their formations tight and defensive. It was clear that they were on the brink of being overwhelmed. He could see the signs of desperation, sporadic movements, uncoordinated attacks, and the telltale gaps in their defensive lines. "General, our current status," Lieutenant Commander Soren reported, stepping forward. "We have 52 ships still operational, but several are heavily damaged. Ammunition and fuel supplies are critically low. We've lost contact with 3 outlying sectors, and the enemy is pressing their advantage." Hart nodded, absorbing the grim reality. "What about our civilian sectors?" Soren's expression grew even more serious. "Evacuations are still underway, but at this rate, they won't be complete before the Unity breaches our final defensive line." Hart clenched his fists, feeling the weight of responsibility. The lives of countless civilians, as well as his soldiers, hung in the balance. He needed to find a way to buy more time. "Initiate emergency protocols," Hart ordered. "Prioritize the evacuation of civilians. Any ships that can be spared are to assist with the evacuation efforts. We need to protect as many lives as possible." Soren relayed the orders, and Hart turned back to the holographic map. His mind raced through potential strategies, searching for any weakness in the Unity's formation. The enemy had them surrounded, but there had to be a way to break the blockade. "Major Rain," Hart called out to his chief tactical officer, who was busy coordinating defensive maneuvers. "What do we know about the Unity's command structure?" Rain looked up, her eyes sharp and focused. "Sir, intelligence suggests that the Unity fleet is led by a coalition of high-ranking officers from each member species. They operate with a high degree of coordination, but we've identified a few key individuals who seem to be central to their strategy." Hart's mind seized on this information. If we can disrupt their command structure, we might be able to create confusion and buy ourselves some time. Prepare a list of priority targets. As Rain began compiling the data, Hart considered his next move. The situation was dire, but he had faced long odds before. He knew that the key to survival lay in staying one step ahead of the enemy. "All hands, this is General Hart," he announced over the ship's intercom. "We are facing a formidable foe, but we will not surrender. We will fight with every ounce of strength we have. Remember, we are fighting for our homes, our families, and our future. Hold the line and trust in each other." The crew responded with a resounding cheer, their spirits lifted by Hart's unwavering resolve. He could see the determination in their eyes, and it fueled his own resolve to find a way out of this impossible situation. General Hart's mind worked at lightning speed as he analyzed the situation. The Unity fleet's formation was strong, but it wasn't invincible. He needed to create a scenario where their numbers would work against them, and he knew just the place to do it. "Lieutenant Commander Soren," Hart called, turning towards his second-in-command. "We need to lure the Unity fleet into the narrow passage between the twin moons of Halcyon 4. It's a natural choke point, and could serve as the perfect trap." Soren nodded, his eyes widening as he realized the potential of Hart's plan. "Yes, sir. If we can get them to follow us, their numbers will be their downfall. But how do we make them take the bait?" Hart's mind was already several steps ahead. "We initiate a strategic retreat. Make it look like we're falling back in disarray. They'll think we're on the ropes and chase us right into the trap." Soren quickly relayed the orders, and the human fleet began to move. Hart's ships, battered but not broken, turned and started to pull back, creating the illusion of a desperate retreat. The Unity fleet, sensing victory, surged forward, eager to crush the remaining human forces. "Maintain radio silence," Hart instructed. "We don't want them to suspect anything. Have our ships fall back at a steady pace, but keep the formation tight. We need to make this look convincing." As the human fleet moved toward the narrow passage, Hart watched the holographic display intently. The Unity ships were taking the bait, following closely and tightening their formation as they prepared to deliver the final blow. "Major Rain," Hart called. "Deploy the mines. Make sure they're positioned just inside the entrance to the passage. We need maximum impact when the Unity fleet enters." Rain executed the orders with precision, and soon a field of mines was hidden within the narrow corridor. The Unity fleet, unaware of the trap, continued its pursuit, driven by overconfidence and the desire for a swift victory. Hart's heart pounded as the enemy fleet drew closer to the trap. He could feel the tension on the bridge, but he remained calm and focused. This was the moment that would decide the battle. "All ships, prepare for Phase 2, Hart commanded. "As soon as the mines detonate, we'll turn and counterattack. Timing is everything." The first wave of Unity ships entered the passage, their sleek alien designs glowing under the harsh light of the twin moons. Hart held his breath, waiting for the perfect moment. "Now!" he ordered. The mines detonated in a series of blinding explosions, tearing through the Unity ships with devastating force. The narrow passage amplified the destruction, creating a chaotic mess of debris and fire. The Unity fleet was caught completely off guard, their formation shattered. "All ships engage," Hart commanded, his voice ringing with authority. The human fleet pivoted with practiced precision, turning to face the disarrayed enemy. They launched a coordinated assault, targeting the Unity ships that were still reeling from the initial explosions. Laser fire and missiles streaked through the void, striking their marks with deadly accuracy. Hart's strategy had worked perfectly. The Unity fleet, once a model of coordination and strength, was now a scene of chaos and confusion. Ships collided, and their communication channels were filled with frantic calls for help. "Focus on their command ships," Hart ordered. "We need to take out their leadership and create even more disarray." The human ships responded with relentless efficiency, homing in on the larger, more important targets. The battle was fierce, but the element of surprise and the tactical advantage of the choke point gave Hart's forces the upper hand. "Steady," Hart murmured, his voice barely audible but firm. "Hold your positions." The human fleet continued its strategic retreat, moving steadily toward the narrow passage between the twin moons of Halcyon 4. The Unity ships, emboldened by what they saw as a disorganized withdrawal, followed eagerly, tightening their formation to prepare for a final, overwhelming strike. As the first wave of Unity ships began to enter the narrow corridor, Hart gave the silent signal. His ships, now concealed in the shadows of the moons and powered down to avoid detection, sprang to life. The mines, carefully placed and primed to detonate, awaited their moment of glory. "Activate the mines," Hart ordered. A series of bright flashes illuminated the dark space as the mines exploded with devastating force. The initial shockwave tore through the leading Unity ships, sending fragments of alien metal and fire spiraling into the void. The narrow passage amplified the destruction, creating a chain reaction that rippled through the enemy fleet. Unity ships collided, their precision formations shattered by the sudden, brutal assault. Panic spread as the rear of the fleet attempted to halt their advance, only to be trapped by their own momentum and the narrow confines of the passage. "Now, all ships, engage," Hart commanded. The human fleet, perfectly positioned and waiting for this moment, launched their counterattack with ruthless efficiency. Laser fire and missiles rained down on the disoriented Unity ships, targeting their exposed flanks and key command vessels. The element of surprise and the tactical advantage of the choke point turned the battle in humanity's favor. "Focus on their lead ships," Hart directed, his eyes never leaving the display. "We need to disrupt their chain of command." Major Rain and her tactical team executed the orders flawlessly. The human ships moved with coordinated precision, their strikes targeting the most critical points of the Unity fleet. Explosions blossomed across the battlefield as key enemy vessels were obliterated. Hart's trap had worked to perfection. The Unity fleet, once a disciplined and overwhelming force, was now a chaotic and fragmented mess. The narrow passage that had been their path to victory became their tomb. "Prepare for a full offensive," Hart commanded. "We won't get another opportunity like this." His officers relayed the orders, and the human fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. The initial shock of the minefield had given them a critical advantage, but Hart knew they had to capitalize on it quickly, before the Unity could regroup. "Target their communication ships," Hart ordered. "We need to keep their fleet in disarray." Major Rain coordinated the strikes, directing fire at the ships responsible for maintaining the Unity's battlefield coordination. As these ships were destroyed, the enemy fleet's ability to communicate and organize effectively was further compromised. The Unity fleet, struggling to maintain cohesion, began to fall back. Hart's ships pressed the attack, their movements precise and lethal. Laser fire cut through the void, striking with pinpoint accuracy. The Unity ships, once so formidable, now found themselves outmaneuvered and outgunned. "Sir, we've identified the Unity flagship," Lieutenant Commander Soren reported. "It's heavily guarded, but if we can take it out, it could break their morale completely." Hart's eyes fixed on the holographic representation of the flagship. It was a massive vessel, bristling with weapons and defensive systems. But Hart knew that its destruction could be the key to securing victory. "Concentrate all available firepower on the flagship," Hart ordered. "Take it down, no matter the cost." The human fleet shifted its focus, pouring everything they had into the assault on the Unity flagship. Missiles streaked through space, accompanied by the relentless barrage of laser fire. The flagship's shields flickered and buckled under the onslaught. "Maintain pressure," Hart urged. "We're almost there." The Unity flagship retaliated, its powerful weapons lashing out at the human ships. Several vessels were hit, explosions rocking their hulls, but the human fleet held its ground, driven by the knowledge that victory was within their grasp. As the flagship's shields finally collapsed, Hart's ships unleashed their final barrage. The flagship erupted in a spectacular explosion, a brilliant ball of fire and debris that lit up the battlefield. The shockwave rippled through the Unity fleet, causing further disarray and panic. "All ships advance," Hart ordered, his voice filled with a mix of triumph and determination. "We have them on the run." The human fleet surged forward, pushing the disorganized Unity ships back. The tables had turned, and now it was the humans who had the upper hand. Hart watched as his ships carved through the enemy ranks, their movements precise and unstoppable. The battle raged on, but the outcome was now clear. The Unity fleet, once an insurmountable threat, was crumbling under the relentless assault. Hart's strategy, his gamble, had paid off. The trap had been sprung, and the counterattack had shattered the enemy's resolve. "General Hart, incoming message from the Unity flagship," Lieutenant Commander Soren announced. Hart nodded. "Put it through." The screen flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of Cathar, a high-ranking Unity commander. Cathar's appearance was striking, with a serpentine body, multiple eyes that shimmered with an unsettling intelligence, and scales that reflected the ambient light in iridescent hues. Despite the alien features, Hart could read the determination and curiosity in Cathar's expression. "General Hart," Cathar began, his voice translated into a deep, resonant tone. I am Cathar of the Unity Coalition. Your tactical brilliance has impressed us, and we find ourselves at an impasse. I propose a temporary ceasefire to discuss terms of negotiation. Hart's eyes narrowed. And why should I trust you, Cathar? Your fleet has been relentless in its pursuit of our destruction. Cathar inclined his head slightly. War is costly for both sides. We have our own divisions and internal struggles. It would be in both our interests to explore a path to peace. Hart considered the offer carefully. This could be a ploy, a chance for the Unity to regroup and launch another assault. But it could also be an opportunity to gain valuable intelligence and potentially sow discord within the Unity ranks. Very well, Hart said finally. We will meet on neutral ground. But know this, Cathar. Any sign of betrayal, and we will not hesitate to resume hostilities. Cathar nodded, his multiple eyes reflecting a complex blend of emotions. Agreed, General Hart. We shall meet at coordinates 451.7, Sector 12. Bring only your most trusted advisors. The transmission ended, and Hart turned to his officers. Prepare for the meeting. This could be our chance to turn the tide of this war even further. The neutral ground chosen for the meeting was an uninhabited asteroid, its surface pockmarked by countless impacts and covered in a fine layer of space dust. Hart's shuttle touched down with a soft thud, and he stepped out onto the barren rock, flanked by Major Elena Rain and Lieutenant Commander Soren. They were met by Cathar and a small delegation of Unity officers. Hart and Cathar exchanged cautious nods before moving to a makeshift table set up between their delegations. The tension in the air was palpable, each side aware that a single misstep could reignite the conflict. Cathar spoke first. General Hart, you have shown great prowess in battle. It is clear that humanity possesses a resilience and tactical acumen that we had underestimated. However, this war has cost us dearly, and we believe there may be another way. Hart leaned forward, his eyes locked on Cathar. Speak plainly, Cathar. What do you propose? Cathar's eyes flickered as he chose his words carefully. The Unity is not as united as it appears. Our coalition is fracturing under the strain of this prolonged conflict. There are factions within our ranks that are open to the idea of a truce, or even an alliance with humanity. If we can negotiate a peace, it could stabilize our coalition and bring an end to this war. Hart considered this. And what would such a peace entail? We cannot simply lay down our arms and hope for the best. Cathar nodded. We propose a cessation of hostilities and the establishment of a demilitarized zone. In return, we will share technology and resources that could benefit both our peoples. Furthermore, we would collaborate on neutralizing any threats that seek to exploit our weakened states. Hart weighed the offer. It was a significant risk, but the potential rewards were equally substantial. And what of the factions within the Unity that oppose this truce? How can we ensure their compliance? Cathar's expression grew more serious. That is where your tactical expertise comes into play. We have identified key figures who are resistant to peace. If we can neutralize or sway them, the rest will follow. We propose a series of joint operations to target these dissenters and stabilize the situation. Hart exchanged glances with Rain and Soren, both of whom nodded subtly. Very well, Cathar. We will agree to the ceasefire and work together to bring about this peace. But know this, we will not be complacent. Any sign of betrayal, and the truce is off. Cathar extended a hand, a gesture of goodwill. Agreed, General Hart. Let us hope this is the beginning of a new era for both our peoples. Hart turned to Major Elena Rain and Lieutenant Commander Soren, who were poring over the data. This is our opportunity, Hart said, tapping the holographic display. The Unity is vulnerable. If we can exploit these fractures, we can destabilize their coalition from within. Rain nodded, her eyes scanning the information. The key figures identified by Cathar are spread across several sectors. We'll need to conduct precise and coordinated operations to neutralize them. Soren added, We've trained for scenarios like this. Our special operations teams are ready. But we need to be careful. Any mistake could lead to a resurgence of hostilities. Hart agreed. We'll divide our forces. Some will conduct sabotage and espionage, while others will engage in direct action to eliminate or sway these key figures. Timing and precision are crucial. The plan was set into motion. Covert operations teams were deployed deep into Unity territory, using stealth technology to avoid detection. Their mission? To gather intelligence, sabotage critical systems, and incite rebellion among the disillusioned factions within the Unity ranks. The first target was a key communication hub on the planet Vexar, controlled by a faction known as the Dracons. Hart's operatives infiltrated the facility, planting explosives and disrupting their communication networks. The resulting chaos hindered the Unity's ability to coordinate their efforts, creating confusion and mistrust among the various factions. Simultaneously, another team was dispatched to the moon of Zariah, where a Unity general known for his staunch opposition to peace was stationed. The team, led by Captain Marcus Quinn, had orders to either capture or eliminate the general. The mission was fraught with danger, but Quinn's team managed to infiltrate the general's compound, neutralize his guards, and take him into custody. As news of these operations spread, the Unity Coalition's internal divisions deepened. Factions began to turn on each other, blaming one another for the failures and betrayals. Hart monitored the situation closely, ready to adapt their strategy as needed. One such team, led by Lieutenant Sarah Anders, was deep within the heart of the Turvax sector, a region controlled by one of the more aggressive factions within the Unity. Their target was a munitions factory, critical to the Unity's war effort. Disabling this factory would not only slow down the production of weapons, but also sow distrust among the Unity leaders. Anders and her team moved with practiced stealth, their suits rendering them nearly invisible in the dim light of the factory. They planted charges at key structural points and hacked into the factory's mainframe, setting it to overload. As they slipped away, the charges detonated, and the factory was consumed in a series of fiery explosions. The loss of the factory was a significant blow to the Unity, but its psychological impact was even greater. The Unity leadership, already paranoid and mistrustful, began to suspect sabotage from within their own ranks. Accusations flew, and alliances within the coalition frayed further. Meanwhile, Captain Quinn's team focused on spreading disinformation. They hacked into Unity communication channels, broadcasting false orders and misleading information. Unity fleets were sent on wild goose chases, resources were misallocated, and internal conflicts were exacerbated. One of the most daring operations involved planting evidence of a coup attempt within the Unity High Command. This was orchestrated by a team led by Sergeant Leo Martinez, who had a reputation for his cunning and adaptability. Martinez's team infiltrated the Unity's central command station, leaving behind falsified documents and intercepted communications that pointed to a conspiracy among some of the highest-ranking officers. The fallout from this operation was immediate and severe. Trust within the Unity High Command disintegrated, and several key officers were arrested or executed based on the fabricated evidence. This power vacuum created further chaos and weakened the Unity's ability to coordinate their efforts against the human forces. Throughout these operations, General Hart maintained communication with Cathar, who provided additional intelligence and confirmed the effectiveness of the human strategies. Cathar's own position within the Unity was strengthened as he distanced himself from the chaos and presented himself as a voice of reason and stability. Hart's strategy of espionage and sabotage was working. The Unity Coalition, once a formidable and coordinated force, was now a collection of fractured and distrustful factions. The human forces, taking advantage of the enemy's disarray, began to reclaim territory and bolster their defenses. With the Unity Coalition in disarray and their command structure severely compromised, General Hart knew that the time had come for a decisive strike. The human fleet had regrouped, repaired, and rearmed, ready to deliver a final blow to the fractured enemy. Hart's strategy was clear. They needed to target the Unity's remaining strongholds and eliminate their capacity to wage war. Hart stood on the bridge of the human flagship, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. "All ships, prepare for the final push," he commanded. his voice firm and resolute. "Our target is the Unity's primary fortress world, Nexus Prime. We take this, and we break their will to fight." The human fleet surged forward, engines blazing as they navigated the treacherous path toward Nexus Prime. The journey was fraught with danger, as remnants of the Unity fleet launched desperate attacks to halt their advance. However, the humans, driven by the prospect of victory, fought with unmatched determination. As they approached Nexus Prime, Hart called for a tactical meeting with his senior officers. Major Rain, Lieutenant Commander Soren, and other key leaders gathered around the holographic display, which showed the heavily fortified defenses of the fortress world. Nexus Prime is defended by an array of orbital platforms, ground-based cannons, and a significant portion of the remaining Unity fleet, Rain explained. "We'll need a multi-pronged attack to break through." Hart nodded. "We'll divide our forces. One group will focus on neutralizing the orbital platforms and clearing a path for our ground assault. The second group will engage the Unity fleet and keep them occupied. The third group, led by Major Rain, will deploy ground troops to secure key objectives on the planet's surface." The plan was set into motion. As the human fleet entered the system, they encountered heavy resistance. Unity ships, despite their weakened state, fought fiercely to defend their stronghold. Explosions lit up the void as ships exchanged fire, and the battle raged with ferocity. Hart's forces targeted the orbital platforms, their precision strikes disabling the massive weapon systems that threatened their advance. Meanwhile, the second group engaged the Unity fleet, using superior tactics and coordination to gain the upper hand. Major Rain's team, equipped with drop pods and advanced ground vehicles, descended to the surface of Nexus Prime. They encountered stiff resistance from Unity ground forces, but Rain's leadership and the determination of her troops pushed them forward. They captured key installations, disabling anti-aircraft systems, and securing landing zones for additional reinforcements. The battle for Nexus Prime reached its climax as Hart's flagship, the Invictus, led the final assault on the Central Command Complex. The fortress, a sprawling structure of alien architecture, loomed ahead, its defenses still formidable. "All ships, concentrate fire on the command complex," Hart ordered. "We need to break through their defenses and end this." The Invictus and its accompanying ships unleashed a torrent of firepower, battering the fortress's shields and fortifications. Gradually, the defenses began to falter, and explosions rocked the structure. Hart knew that victory was within reach, but the cost was high. Several human ships had been lost, and casualties were mounting. Yet the prospect of ending the war and securing a future for humanity drove them onward. "Ground teams, move in and secure the command complex," Hart commanded. "We need to capture their leaders and ensure they can't regroup." Rain's ground forces stormed the fortress, engaging in fierce combat with the remaining Unity defenders. The corridors echoed with the sounds of battle as they pushed deeper into the complex. Finally, they reached the central command chamber, where the Unity leaders had gathered for their last stand. Hart received the transmission from Rain. "Sir, we've secured the command complex. The Unity leaders are surrendering." A wave of relief washed over Hart. The war was not yet over, but this victory marked a turning point. The capture of Nexus Prime dealt a crippling blow to the Unity coalition, leaving them with little capacity to continue their aggression. The communication console beeped, and Hart accepted the incoming transmission from Major Rain. Her face appeared on the screen, grim but resolute. "General, we've secured all primary objectives. The Unity leadership is in our custody, and their remaining forces are surrendering. It's over." Hart nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "Good work, Major. Ensure that the prisoners are treated with respect. We need to show that we are different from what they expected." The victory was monumental, but it came with a heavy cost. Hart's mind turned to the lives lost in the final push, the brave soldiers who had given everything for this moment. He knew that the scars of this conflict would linger long after the last shot was fired. As the human fleet began to regroup and repair, Hart ordered a comprehensive search and rescue mission to recover any survivors from the battlefield. Ships moved methodically, scanning for escape pods and life signs amidst the wreckage. On Nexus Prime, the ground forces worked tirelessly to secure the planet, and provide aid to both human and Unity casualties. Medical teams, engineers, and support personnel were deployed to tend to the wounded and begin the long process of rebuilding. Hart convened a meeting with his senior staff to discuss the next steps. Major Rain, Lieutenant Commander Soren, and other key officers gathered around the table, their faces reflecting a mix of relief and exhaustion. "We've won a significant victory, but the war isn't over yet," Hart began. "We need to consolidate our gains and prepare for any counterattacks. The Unity may be fractured, but they are not defeated." Rain spoke up. "Sir, our intelligence suggests that some Unity factions are already calling for a ceasefire. The capture of their leadership and the loss of Nexus Prime has dealt a severe blow to their morale." Hart considered this. "We should use this momentum to push for peace, begin drafting terms for a ceasefire and eventual negotiations. We need to show them that a future without war is possible." As the meeting concluded, Hart took a moment to reflect. The road ahead was still fraught with challenges, but for the first time in years, there was a glimmer of hope. The war had taken its toll, but humanity had proven its resilience and strength. Back on the bridge, Hart looked out at the stars. The final push had been brutal, and the cost of victory was high. But with Nexus Prime secured and the Unity leadership in custody, there was a real chance for lasting peace. Hart knew that they had to seize this opportunity and work towards rebuilding what had been lost. As he stood there, contemplating the future, a sense of determination filled him. The battles ahead would be different, fought not with weapons, but with diplomacy and cooperation. It was a new kind of war, one that Hart was ready to lead humanity through, toward a brighter, more hopeful tomorrow. In the weeks following the capture of Nexus Prime, the human fleet remained vigilant, their eyes trained on the void for any signs of a Unity counterattack. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but the war's scars ran deep, and the galaxy was still a volatile place. General Hart worked tirelessly, coordinating relief efforts and ensuring that the hard-won peace held firm. Nexus Prime had become a hub of activity as engineers, medical personnel, and humanitarian teams from both sides collaborated to rebuild the devastated world. The once impregnable fortress was now a symbol of cooperation and hope. On the surface, Major Rain supervised the reconstruction efforts. She moved through the bustling camps and work zones, offering support and guidance. Medical tents were set up to treat the wounded, while engineers worked to restore essential services and infrastructure. The mood was somber but hopeful. Soldiers and civilians alike understood the significance of their efforts. In one of the makeshift hospitals, Rain found Lieutenant Commander Soren, who had taken on a new role overseeing the distribution of medical supplies. "How are we holding up?" she asked, noting the tired but determined look on his face. "We're making progress," Soren replied. "Supplies are coming in, and the wounded are receiving the care they need. It's slow, but we're getting there." Rain nodded. "Good. We need to keep the momentum going. The sooner we stabilize Nexus Prime, the stronger our position will be in the upcoming peace talks." Meanwhile, Hart was in constant communication with Cathar and other Unity leaders, who had shown a willingness to negotiate. The negotiations were delicate, fraught with the remnants of mistrust and lingering hostility. Hart understood that building a lasting peace required patience and perseverance. In one such meeting, held via holographic conference, Hart and Cathar discussed the terms of the ceasefire. "We need to establish clear boundaries and protocols," Hart said. "Both sides must commit to disarmament and the dismantling of war facilities." Cathar agreed. "It will be challenging to convince all factions, but I believe it is possible. We must present a united front and show that peace benefits everyone." As the negotiations progressed, Hart's team worked on logistical plans to support the peace process. This included setting up joint task forces to handle any rogue elements that might threaten the fragile truce. Intelligence operations continued to monitor potential threats, ensuring that any attempt to reignite the conflict could be swiftly countered. Back on Earth, the mood was cautiously optimistic. News of the victory and the ongoing peace efforts had lifted spirits, but the memories of the war's devastation were still fresh. Families mourned lost loved ones, and communities worked to rebuild what had been destroyed. Hart made a point to visit Earth, speaking at memorials and offering words of encouragement. "We have endured much," he said at one such gathering, "but we have also shown that we can overcome even the greatest of challenges. Together we will rebuild, and together we will ensure a future free from the horrors of war." Months turned into a year, and the galaxy began to adjust to a new reality. The ceasefire held, and the once fractured Unity Coalition began to transform into a more stable and cooperative entity. The former enemies were now partners in the effort to rebuild and ensure lasting peace. On Nexus Prime, the transformation was most visible. The ruins of the fortress had been repurposed into a center for diplomacy and interspecies cooperation. The once militarized world now hosted representatives from various factions and species, working together to forge a better future. General Hart oversaw the establishment of the Nexus Accord, a treaty that formalized the peace and outlined the terms of cooperation. The accord included provisions for disarmament, economic collaboration, and joint security initiatives to prevent the rise of any new threats. It was a monumental achievement, and Hart knew that it would require constant vigilance to maintain. One of the key components of the Nexus Accord was the creation of a new fleet, not for war, but for exploration and mutual aid. The Unified Exploratory Fleet, UEF, was composed of ships from both human and Unity origins, symbolizing the new era of cooperation. Hart was appointed as the fleet's first commander, a role that emphasized the trust and respect he had earned. At the inaugural ceremony of the UEF, Hart stood before a diverse assembly of humans and aliens. "Today marks the beginning of a new journey," he declared. "We have put aside our differences and come together to explore the unknown, to aid those in need, and to ensure that the darkness of our past never returns." The fleet's first mission was to venture into uncharted territories, seeking new resources and establishing contact with other civilizations. The hope was that by expanding their horizons, they could prevent the insular thinking that had led to so much conflict. Major Rain and Lieutenant Commander Soren were key figures in the new fleet. Rain led ground expeditions. Her experience in combat now turned towards exploration and discovery. Soren, with his logistical expertise, coordinated the fleet's movements and ensured that their missions ran smoothly. On one of their early missions, the UEF encountered a previously unknown civilization on the fringes of known space. The Cordons, a species with a rich cultural heritage and advanced technology, welcomed the fleet with curiosity and cautious optimism. The initial meeting was tense, but Hart's diplomatic skills helped bridge the gap, leading to a fruitful exchange of knowledge and resources. The UEF's success stories began to spread, inspiring hope across the galaxy. Former enemies became allies, working together to explore, learn, and grow. Hart's vision of a united galaxy, built on the foundation of cooperation and mutual respect, was becoming a reality. As the fleet continued its missions, Hart reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The war had been brutal, and the path to peace had been fraught with challenges. But humanity and their former adversaries had shown that they could rise above their differences and build something greater. Hart stood on the bridge of the UEF's flagship, looking out at the stars. The galaxy was vast, filled with endless possibilities. With a sense of purpose and a renewed commitment to peace, he knew that they were ready to face whatever lay ahead. The era of conflict was over, and a new era of exploration and unity had begun.